Hey gang, today we begin our final presentations. I'm really looking forward to these. These are the final presentations for computer graphics, where all of the teams are going to start showing off their hard work. Each of the presentations will be about 20 minutes. You can go a little bit over that if you need to, about 20 minutes. And since we have 6 teams, that would be too many to do in one day. So we're going to do the presentations in reverse alpha order, because for the midterms we did them in alpha order. So to be fair to everybody, we're doing them in reverse alpha order. So today the We and Ed team, the We and Ed 3090 TI team, will be going first, followed by Nature's End, followed by Mission Control. So those are the 3 teams that are going to be presenting today. This is being recorded like all of our student presentations and lectures, so that if you'd like to go back and review how you did, it's there. Also, just a reminder one more time, these are student evaluated, student peer evaluated, and as I've described before I started the lecture officially, everyone should have access to the evaluations, and you can save them whenever you fill out something for a team, just to be safe. Okay, without further ado then, why don't the We and Ed group, why don't you guys take over?
Can you see this all right?
I see your slides. I don't see anyone's smiling face except my own. Let me unpin my video. Now I see Andrew's smiling face. Okay, take it away, guys.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are We and Ed 3090 Ti.
Jason, do you have a cam so people can see?
I'm connecting on my phone right now.
Oh, yeah, okay. Keep going.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are We and Ed 3090 Ti. I am Jason Miles, and with me, we also have Noah, Brian, and Ross. So to quickly go over some of our rules for the project, throughout the whole course of the project, Brian has been in charge of making models that we can't find online and applying some of the textures to them. Noah has been implementing the room logic and planning out the rooms for the game. Ross has been finding us models, and I've been putting the room together in Unreal.
All right, so to go over some of the background of the project and what we aim to do. So initially we were trying to create a game reminiscent of the point and click escape room games of the 2000s. But we wanted to incorporate that in a 3D environment because this is a graphics class. So we started out wanting to do 5 rooms. We realized about midway through the quarter that 5 rooms was going to be a lot of work.
Okay, let me stop you. I assume it's Noah because I see Noah Broussard and that's it. As I've asked several times, please have cameras available so that people can see you talking. And if you come in on a phone, like I'm on a phone as well as on video, link it so that, because what happens is when this is recorded, all that's going to show up is your name. And the slide next to it. Even if you have video, what happens on the recording is the person who's speaking whose video is recorded. So it does no good. I can't see you when you're in screen share mode if your video is running on some other screen, and it's not going to be recorded that way. So I've asked this several times. I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation, but I've made it very clearly known that when you're presenting, people need to be able to see you speak. Okay, I don't know how many more times I can say it. So if you're able to correct that, please do so. Thank you. And now you have the floor back, Noah.
All right, I'm here and in video. Sorry, I was on my desktop before. I'm on my laptop now. So initially we decided to do 5 rooms. We thought that would be a good length, but right around midterm, we realized that doing 5 rooms was actually going to be a lot of work if we wanted to polish them all and make sure that everything was running smoothly and everything was textured well. So we ended up cutting it down to 3 rooms, which allowed us extra time to go through and polish the game. Next slide, please. So this is the timeline. So for the first half of the project, this is leading up to right about midterm. The first couple weeks, we were just trying to figure out what we wanted to do and creating a rough roadmap and getting ideas for the rooms. The next couple weeks after that, we were just trying to figure out what the heck we were doing in Unreal Engine. None of us really had any experience in Unreal before this. So we were trying to create base models, kind of make a floor plan for that first room, get through that initial jump in the learning curve. And then after that, the next week, we essentially redid room 1, which we had implemented beforehand just as a mock-up. We put in new models for that room, and those were essentially the models that we ended up sticking with for that room. We ended up texturing them later on. But then for the second half of the project, we were focused on getting the other 2 rooms built and then texturing them all. So week 7 and 8, we implemented the logics for room 1 and 2, which is the doors that will open and close. This was the first time that the sir and the ma'am appeared and they would control the doors. And then weeks 9 and 10, we ended up building room 3, which we kind of had the mirrors working. They weren't quite functional all the way yet. And we also finished out all of the logic for all 3 rooms. And then weeks 11 and 12, which are the last 2, we made some quality of life changes to room 2. We finished room 3 and we retextured essentially everything. Now I'll hand it off to Brian with the models.
Hi, so for the models we made for the project, these all included things we made in Maya, and Noah did a bit of the things in a different program. I made in room 1, the desk, the book, and the pen. All the textures you see, we didn't actually make those, obviously. We pulled them from online and we applied them to our models. We also made the stanchions, which are like it's the ropes with the poles that are up around the pillars, so you can see in the second image. And the signs and the columns, all those are made by us. We also made the doors, the terminals, and excuse the audio issues in this background. We also have made there's a display table we took as some feedback from our midterm, where it was really hard to tell what was answered already for each of the hints. And so we decided we wanted to make a table that would show every word, the first letter, since that was like the big deal of it, and display that. And we also made and modeled all of the rooms themselves. So that's just the walls and the floors. For room 1, this room's puzzle is pretty much linked to the layout of the room. You want to be looking and paying attention to how everything is placed in the room and linking it to how the tiles in the floor, the pattern, is similar to the terminal's input. So once you figured out the answer, you would put in on the SIR, and you would hit submit, and the door would hopefully open.
All right, so for room 2, what we wanted to do was have a bunch of pillars with objects on top of them. Then we wanted to have with the object completely invisible, and we wanted to have a hint that would tell you as to what the object was, which you could then enter in a word at the door, which would reveal the object. And then what we wanted to do for our final answer to allow you to open the door and pass to room 3 was to have all of the objects lead up to one puzzle. So what we decided to do was have 3 rows of objects, and each of the first letters of the object would lead to hints towards the final answer being drum, in which we originally just had it so that you would have to figure out that the first letter of each of the objects would lead to the answer. But we figured that after our midterm, I think it was, or one of our recent presentations, we figured that we should just add a little pad to the wall that would keep track of all of the first letters of the answers, so that it wasn't too wild and wacky to try and think of using that and finding another answer. So we eventually ended up just adding the keypad so that it kept track of all the answers. So it's pretty streamlined, straightforward. You got to answer and find all the object names, and then eventually you have to figure out that the first letters on the walls lead to answering the final door. So, and for room number 3, we have a room full of mirrors and clocks. And what we wanted to do here was make it so that there's one specific clock that when viewed inside of a mirror, you could see it, but whenever you weren't looking at a mirror, you don't see it. And that would be the answer to the door to allow you to complete the game. So what we did is we placed a bunch of mirrors and clocks all around the room, and the mirrors basically just show, instead of being very reflective, because that's sometimes kind of hard to do in Unreal Engine, what we decided to do was have points that were essentially new cameras. And so whenever you look at the mirror, it's showing you the perspective through that camera. And then one of the cameras obviously shows a mirror that you can't see normally. I mean, a clock that you can't see normally, which then once you realize that that's what's going on, you look at the time on it and then input that into the door, and that allows you to complete the game. So now we will show you a short demo.
All right. So as you can see, most of room 1 has been like completely retextured. The plants have color finally. The chair has been colored in. The walls have been redone. The desk has been redone as well. The puzzle is essentially still the same. You're just looking for the tiles that have objects on them. And you just come in and put it on the SIR. Room 2 is where a lot of the texture changes have taken place. But in order to see them, I'm gonna go through like each object and make each object appear. So I'll start with like the first hint, which is a baking device. You'll come over here on the MAM and type in oven. And you'll notice on this table over here on the wall, there's a green letter now for the corresponding object on this row of pedestals. Base counterpart, which is acid. We have an acid barrel hill now. And now we have another letter for the second row. Adhesive substance and glue. Something to note is that all these answers for the objects in these rows are 4-letter words. "12 p.m. is noon." And this is essentially like what the gameplay of this room would look like. We increased the movement speed of the character and made it scale up from like a slower amount to a maximum amount, and also got rid of like the hands that you could see. Acorn trees or oaks. metal money is a coin. So once you fill out all the objects in one row, or once you figure out what all the objects in one row are, you can see like on the panel here, you have a word that's spelled out. So what these words spelled out are bongo, conga, and snare. And these are all types of drums. And this is the type of puzzle, or this is the solution to the puzzle that the player is supposed to figure out. So lastly, we have our mirror room. And I just want to say, like, going through it and making all these clock hands at different times was quite tedious process, but it looks much better than all being on the same time. The mirrors are finally working compared to the last time. They're still a little bit low resolution, but there comes to a point where it's like performance is like the game has to be playable before it looks good. I mean, we've basically made it so that the mirrors update every time the game is loaded, and if we make any changes in the room, they're reflected only when the game is loaded. But essentially, all these clocks are on random times, and all the mirrors are pointing in random directions, and you're looking for a mirror that has a clock that is not in the room. What's interesting about this one is that you can only see this digital clock and read the time if you're looking at it through certain perspectives. So the time on this digital clock is 11:07, which is the answer to the door over here. And that is essentially the end of our game. This is where most of our assets come from. And other than that, are there any questions?
Well, I'd just like to say that it's pretty cool. Like I said in text, it reminds me of classic Myst. I don't know how many of you ever played Myst, but Myst was a groundbreaking game back in the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s. But it was a puzzle solving game, very, very much like this. That was very beautiful, and had problems, to solve that were kind of typical of these kinds of problems. What were your influences for this game?
So one of the biggest influences for this game is a game puzzle called Lock, which is available through Dreams for the PlayStation 4, which is kind of like an Unreal, like a game editor. And it revolves around these 4-letter words that you have to solve for each room to get out of. So that's kind of where we got the second one, where we have to have the 4-letter word. And then we played off of that to get the digital clock and what ends up being a binary 5x5 grid for the first one. And we used that to get the idea of what to do.
That's cool. Are there any other questions for the group? Come on, there's got to be at least one question other than a Mike O'Neill question.
So the different input interfaces on the doors, it ended up being really easy looking back at it, but in the process, it took a solid 4 weeks to figure out what the heck I was doing. What we had to do was make widgets. And so each of these keypads are widgets that are sitting on an object on a static mesh, and that static mesh is sitting on the door, obviously. Oh, he reset it. And there
Yeah,
you
I'm
go.
just gonna see if I can pull up real quick.
Yeah, if you just pull up one of the doors,
Okay.
and then you can hit edit, and we can see it. So essentially, yeah, we just have widgets sitting on static meshes, and those widgets are used to input, and you can get text values or binary values from them, and then check them against other text values or binary values, and if they're equal, then have it do something. And there was one more question. Yeah, the widgets are just interactables. We have them viewing in-game, but you can also make it like a heads-up display. How do we decide on the aesthetics? Does somebody else want to answer that one?
Yeah, as far as the aesthetics, why don't you guys answer that one in chat?
Okay.
And we will go ahead. Thank you guys for your presentation. We'll move on now to Nature's End. Nature's End. You need to unshare your screen. Okay, thank you. Okay, so who's sharing here?
Andrew.
That'll be me sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, Kyle, let's see if you're able to do that, okay?
Yeah, just making sure which screen is which. Pressing the wrong one, actually. Should be screen 2. Actually, did y'all see the PowerPoint with this one?
Yes.
We do
Okay.
now.
Oh, that's supposed to be screen 2, but okay.
All righty, so take it away, guys.
We are Nature's End by me, Logan, Andrew Hall, and Kyle Roussel. First off, we're going to go over the landscapes, and Andrew's going to take it away to explain what he did for that.
So one of the biggest things I have worked on in this project was getting the landscape working. I made the whole height map for the whole map, and the biggest thing with that was the texture material. I really wanted to have a way to make an automated texture so that I didn't have to go in and color the whole thing by hand. I know I've seen a lot of the tutorials and stuff where it's just like one big plane of grass, and it didn't really look great. And I had kind of taken some inspiration from some old NES games like The Legend of Zelda, where you have these really distinctive, like you can walk here or this is a wall kind of textures in like villages and whatnot, where you have the very flat areas where you're allowed to walk. And I thought that that would look really cool, kind of as a updated version. And so I made the contextual materials that we will that you've seen through all of our snapshots. And then since the last sprint, I've been working on refining that, as well as getting in grasses, and Kyle has been helping me he did trees and flowers as well. So if we can go to the next slide. So we have in the top the sample of grasses that we've done, and then we've got the flowers there on the bottom, and on the previous page we had that little snapshot of the trees, which you guys will see later on in the demos. And we have had some issues. None of us have a really powerful desktop, so we've been having to use the ground scatter very sparingly, because it adds just tremendous amounts of work for the renderers. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of grass in the map, but in some areas we have chosen to have them be more grassy than others. There are flowers scattered pretty well throughout, but they're not very dense. They don't take up as much processing. They're also not animated. I did play with that a little bit in a test, but it just added way too much processing speed, and it made it take like 2 hours to render. So we decided not to include that in the final version, so that it would actually run on one of our computers. Let's see, if you go to the next slide. So this is a sampling of the all the textures used in the map. You've got the really rich green grass at the bottom. We've also got a much lighter scrubby moss on the left. The darker texture near the grass is the dirt texture that generates at the lower altitudes. And then when you get above y equals 4,000, you have the light gray and white of the stone rocks and the snow textures that tops the mountains. And those two textures replace the grass and the dirt above y4000. And all of those get painted on, except for the moss. The moss you have to paint on to designate it yourself. You can also paint any of the textures on any surface, like I've done here. I've added the marble and snow and rock to just the side of a hill, so that we could have a sample of all the textures next to each other in place. But this is not in the actual final map. I just wanted to have an image of this. If you go to the next one, I have the blueprint of the whole. So this is the blueprint for the entire material. The big square on the left is the logic behind making all of the different layers. And then I do a bunch of slope interpolation and positional interpolation to get the height. I'm using the Z channel to interpolate from ground into mountain. And then it mixes up some random alpha channels to give it a non-uniform tiling, so that you don't just have, it's not super repeated. It does repeat over about 64 times scale. So instead of having really small textures, it's kind of bigger chunks that repeat. I wasn't able to get it to like perfectly be completely non-uniform, but it looks pretty good overall. And then it also was impacting the rendering heavily to have it be bumpy all over the map. So I implemented a algorithm from one of the default materials in the starter content at the bottom, that basically the further away from the player you are, it basically goes to completely flat at about 200 units away from the observer, so that it does not have to render all of the normal maps. It just gets a flat map past that. And that helps speed up the processing time a lot, actually, while maintaining a non-uniform surface, like right under your feet and in the surrounding area right around you. So when you're up close to it, which you will be because it's a first-person game, it looks pretty good, but you do lose detail in the distance, but it makes it run a lot faster. I also added normal maps for each of the textures since the last update. So we are no longer using a single normal map for every texture. I wanted to have sand eventually. You know, we did say we wanted to have a desert biome at the beginning, and we tried having that working, but the availability on the Unreal Marketplace for a lower quality sand texture. I wasn't able to find one that would work for us. And so we just had to revert back to one of our older builds of a material to update it with the new normal maps, because the sand textures that I could find were like 8K, and GitHub just didn't allow us to transmit those files to each other. It caused actually a lot of problems there, and I spent a significant time trying to get that to work, and it ended up having to get scrapped, just due to the file sharing. But next, I believe they're going to talk about the actual game aspect that we implemented into this.
So Mike, Dr. O'Neill did say we're halfway through, so.
Okay, I'll be quick. So we implemented a mini game of a cube game. I implemented this. It utilizes the pawn and AI systems in Unreal Engine. Through this, I familiarized myself with level blueprints, the usefulness of trigger boxes, and then nav meshes volumes, and how they interact. That was one of the biggest problems with these, because Kyle's animals need nav meshes, but so does my game, and it causes issues with mainly my game, because it'll register that you're inside of one when you're inside the one with the animals, and so that was something we had to deal with. Kyle, can you move on to the next slide, please? On this is my pawn blueprint, which is just the cube, and mainly focuses on the effect when you shoot it, which is an explosion, which I thought was pretty neat. And it also focuses on, no, actually, that's the AI system. Kyle, can you move on to the next slide, please? This is the level blueprint, which deals with the trigger box, which releases the pawn box that chases after you intermittently through a time loop. Kyle, can you go to the next slide? And this is the AI system, which essentially just finds the first person location. And when the box gets released out of the trigger box, it chases after you. And any kind of impact, whether it be from your gun or your body, it will explode. And now I'll pass it off to Kyle to talk about his animals.
All right, so I'm going to do that while kind of playing the game for a bit. So with my animals, we have a fox, deer, and a doe. And a few foxes are over here, does over there, deers. So you got the trees all over here. We got the foliage kind of painted in. You can hardly see the flowers as you kind of walk past them. See foxes over here. They do interact still with the player. And over the course of the game, I was trying to look for what animals kind of use. And then I found these on the Unreal Engine's marketplace, and they had animations, so I thought I should use them. Let's see. I was trying to get the crows to work, but they, instead of flying away, they teleported a lot, so couldn't figure that out at the end, which, while teleporting crows are nice and lovely, not what I'm going for. So, and yeah, so here are the does, deers, and all the way over here is the over here is where we had the mini game, but that also is not working fully with, at least with my game. So it was working with Logan's, but not mine for some reason. So here's the temperamental child here. Any questions?
So what exactly do you mean when you say something's working, not working with your game, but is working with Logan's game?
So
you guys were talking about some kind of a conflict.
So initially, whenever we started off in a nav mesh, it would kind of react to the player then, but whenever you walk out of the Fox nav mesh into its own, it would not move anymore. And so he moved it over, got my character out, and now whenever you try to interact with it, which is going to explode a mixed noise, it doesn't react to the player at all. But whenever Logan's playing, he shoots it itself, and little cubes start flying towards the player. So we just haven't been able to figure that out.
So the original game, I mean, the original goal was for it to be a mini game. So you would shoot the cube, it would explode, and then the game would begin, and the cubes would chase after you. So you would spawn outside of the nav mesh, walk into the game area, shoot the cube to activate the mini game, and start playing the game and shoot them as they come towards you. Well, on mine it worked, but during integration, I don't know. We thought it was the two nav meshes because when you walked into the nav mesh for the animals, it would activate my game in another location. And so when you would walk over to it, the cube would be on the edge of the nav mesh facing towards where you were. But so that was one issue. And then also when you shoot it, for whatever reason, the trigger box doesn't want to release them like it does on my side. And we couldn't figure out where that issue lied. We went through step by step of everything I did. We even tried to redo everything from scratch and we couldn't figure out what the issue was.
So did you demo your mini game?
So did I demo my mini game? No, sir, but I can if you would like me to.
Well, it's you guys' presentation, and you have another 5 minutes left. So you guys tell me what y'all are doing.
If you can get it up within 5 minutes, we can, but
okay,
it's not already up.
Well, I mean, I please don't feel under any obligation to do that. It's just that you guys mentioned that you had two parts to your project and that they weren't integrated. So I'm just trying to give you guys the opportunity to show off.
Sure. No problem.
Show off everything you guys did.
Okay, so Eric also had a question about the nav mesh, and the nav mesh, at least in my animal cases, and I believe it's the same for the box case, it's supposed to allow the animals to kind of like take a point inside of this little bounds of this green area over here. And like, all right, I can reach this. So let me try to move my character over to it. And so it'll kind of walk within these walls essentially of green. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's just supposed to give the AI pathing. Yeah. Just an endpoint for the pathing. Yeah. Words are not my strong suit, so I forget them. Yeah, it's just endpoints, and it just takes the shortest path to get to it. So
my editor is loading. It's really slow.
Yeah, it's probably not going to start. So any other questions?
No, that's fine. That's fine. Are there other questions for the team? Okay. There doesn't seem to be any more questions, and you guys are going to pass on showing that other component. So if that's it, then we'll move on to the next presentation. Anything else? All righty. Okay. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. Moving on now to our final presentation for today. That is mission control. Kyle, let's see. You've unshared your screen. So mission control. Okay, got it. Okay, Eric, we can see your presentation. Sounds good. Take it away, Eric.
All right. I think it was actually somebody else doing the first slide, but
I'll take it. Can you guys hear me just fine?
yep.
Yes.
All right, sweet.
Good.
All right, so we are mission control. This is our final presentation. You know, our group members. There's me, Cody Johnson, Eric Pitts, Landon Jackson, and Tony Toussaint. So our project goals for this project, we wanted to create a world which was themed around the concept of an alien forest planet. We wanted to try and focus purely on creating an aesthetically interesting environment more than anything. Like we're kind of foregoing game features in favor of making the project just look like really good graphically, because we felt like that was what the class was supposed to be focusing on. Since it is a graphics design class, we wanted to just try and focus on learning as much about graphics design as we could. Now the world, the alien planet itself, was divided into 3 overarching regions. That would be a mushroom cave that the player wakes up in. This is where you start. And then after you leave the cave area, you walk onto the top of a mountain, which overlooks a heavily forested area. And then you're going to go down into that forested area and walk through it. And then after walking through it along a path, you're going to reach the end of it, which, leads out into a large lake. So the general roles that we tried to establish for this project, Eric Pitts, he created I don't know why I said his full name there, sorry. It felt weird. Eric created models and set up models for importing into Unreal Engine, and he edited materials in Unreal Engine. So he basically made, he set up a lot of the trees and the plants and stuff that we ended up using, and he, took those into the engine and some of the materials as well. Landon ended up altering the map terrain and altered some materials in order to allow blended materials. Generally, he worked on like the height map, the landscapes around the map, like the mountains in the background, stuff like that. I implemented post-processing effects and touched up on environmental details. So there were some, post-processing effects like camera exposure that I focused on, and I tried to also touch up any things that we looked like we were missing. Maybe I would make a tree connect to the ground properly, or just go around and some finer details. And Tony worked on some particle systems and visual effects. He went ahead and put in some cool little fog systems and stuff like that, and some interesting effects, and even a little bit of sound, which we'll get to pretty soon.
Hopefully, if Zoom allows it.
So this is our summary of progress. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So first we altered texture painted on the hills to become more rocky and grassy. We noticed that they were grassy, so we wanted to kind of change that to give it a more mountainy feel. We added further decorative plants to the forest and lake area. We felt like we just needed a couple more plants needed to add to our lake area to make it distinct from the forest. We added fog particles, fog sheets, and light shafts to the forest. We put some God rays in, so we're going to be looking at that during the demo. We fixed minor issues with the map, such as terrain edges being visible from the inside the map, or parts of the landscapes that were not properly connecting to the environment objects. Like right at the point where the cave was meeting the outside world, there was a little bit of an issue where you could see through the map a little bit, and we fixed that. We modified landscape material to decrease obvious tilting. That was a little problem we had. And we increased visual appearance of the water in the lake. So this is just an example of the mountaintops. I didn't like how they were grassy at the very top, so I wanted to make it more look natural. And I noticed that since it was basically our borders of the map, if you looked from the complete left in some areas, you could see a little bit inside the map because it was the very edge and was cut off a little bit. So I added more land to the back to make it look natural instead of having just a direct cut off. Can you go to the next one?
All right, so this is one of the fog particle systems that we've implemented. It's essentially just a ground fog. The material itself is a sphere mask blended with the color and a texture sample to get the albedo and the extinction. Depending on the texture sample you use can actually change it dramatically. The particle system itself is an emitter with the set location as a cylinder. So for each of the particles in it is gonna spawn in a cylinder, and from that cylinder it has velocity and it's gonna spread within a cylinder, but it starts off as a cylinder, but as it spreads, it loses that cylinder shape and it looks more natural. And it has a collision added into it, and the collision starts in the first person blueprint. It allows for when you walk through the fog, there's a trail behind it. And a point attraction was used in the particle system. That way, when you walk along with the trail that's left behind, it'll spread a little bit to kind of give like the natural effect that goes with the fog. And these are some of the sound effects that we've implemented. For footsteps, adding footsteps to sound, usually it's done using an animation, but being that ours is a first person kind of view, there was no animation to add footprints to. So in order to add the footprints, we had to go into the first person character blueprint again. And from there, you would get a velocity from when the character moves from the key presses, and from there, it'll tell if it's moving on the X or the Y axis. And if it's moving on the zeta, that means the character's either falling or jumping. So it either you want to set it to where you catch those movements on the X and Y, but also make sure the zeta is still 0 to check for movement. And basically from there, you're just setting the location of the sound near the feet, where the feet would be, and putting it on like a timed interval for like 0.5 seconds or whatever sounds more natural to you, or would to get the idea of what footsteps will sound like. We also added the sound of fire burning to the capsule where you'll start in the game, and cave ambience for when you're walking through the cave to kind of give it the environment a more realistic feel, because with just silence, it was kind of uneasy when you test it out. It'd just be like complete silence. And as you go into the forest, there's going to be various environmental sounds as well. Hopefully it works on Zoom.
So we made some changes to the landscape material because originally, like, the landscape material just took in like one texture and then plugged it directly into the base color channel. And that created some very obvious tiling effect. As you can see on the left, like you can very clearly tell like what the texture looks like just because you can see the same image repeating over and over again. So we updated it to the one on the right where we take the two textures and we scale them slightly differently and then blend them together uh, using some like using some like macro texture variation textures that come with Unreal Engine. It's the same kind of stuff that they use in a lot of their starter materials, and that's what I based it off of. But I just set it up to where it kind of did the same stuff for the same kind of stuff they would do with the starter material for making it not just a uniform tiling, and did it just for all of our textures that we were using in the landscape material, so that we could get this nice kind of randomized effect on the ground texture. We added in some fog sheets and light shaft blueprints. I actually found these from a Unreal example project. And rather than being like actual light or fog like systems, they're actually just textures that look like light and fog that are laid onto a transparent mesh and then suspended in the air so that it like gives the illusion that you have like light shafts or fog just hanging in the air. But it's a lot easier to just set those up like and set them up like in such a way where like they're exactly where you want them to be instead of having to rely on the automatic generation to do what you want it to do. So it was easier to get it set up where there was like a tangible, visible effect than trying to use like some of the other systems in Unreal. We've added in a bunch of plants since the last sprint. I didn't model any of these. We got them off the internet. I just pulled them up in Blender and made sure that all of the textures and materials and such were set up before I imported them into Unreal. So that after importing them into Unreal, it was just a simple matter of like putting the materials on the objects. And for the most part, like importing into Unreal, the material was already bound to the object. It was just sorting out any weird naming discrepancies that might have come up during the import process. Oh, forgot about this.
We added this because this has turned out to be one of our biggest problems during this project, is that the more that we added to the map, it just got really difficult to run even in the preview, the editor. I mean, when Eric changed some of the land textures earlier, since the last update, I've had issues even loading the map. It's taken a couple of tries to even load the map.
Don't ask him to build lighting.
Yeah, my computer straight up told me no.
Crash. Unreal. Do not do.
Like, just we kind of included this, like, A is just because we thought it was amusing, but B mostly because like the performance hit on like making the map look nicer was a significant barrier to development in a lot of places. Like by the end of the project, Landon was having difficulty even doing anything at all, just because the performance impact of Unreal is just extraordinarily high. But that being said, we're going to move into our demo. We have sound, and I'm going to try and share sound with y'all. I don't know how well that's going to work. If it's too loud, I will turn it off. If it's too quiet, I don't know how to fix that. We're going to give it a shot. How is that, by the way? Is that audible?
We can hear that.
Sounds good. Is it too loud, guys? I can't hear it very well.
Right, cool. Well, we decided to start off in the beginning. We haven't really done much in here, so like y'all have seen all this before, but this is just our cave area. That's the escape pod that we presumably crash landed in. We now have the fire sound effects in here. We're just gonna go ahead and move on to the next part of this.
Just a second, Dr. O'Neill, can you keep us honest on our time? Just make sure we're not running over 20 minutes.
Move into the rest of this
Yeah,
cave.
I'll be happy. You're good. You've got 10 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you.
Move into the rest of the cave, and you can hear these water drop sounds that would be presumably coming from the water dropping from the ceiling here. As for things that we modeled ourselves, these stalactites, stalagmites on the ceiling are things we modeled ourselves. The pillars, the green mushrooms, and the pink mushrooms over here are all things that we set up ourselves. We set up the water material based on a tutorial, granted, but we did set that up ourselves. You can hear the footsteps as we walk around if I'll stop talking. You can see the tops of the mountains that we fixed up. And a lot of this is stuff y'all have already seen before. We come down to the side of the mountain, which just for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip down to the bottom, but you can see like the texture on the ground looks significantly better than it did when we showed it off last time. I'm just gonna come down here. And you can see the fog start to fade in here as we get closer to it. So move over here and you can see like we've added a lot of plants down to the bottom forest area. Like before we just had all these like little light trees and the big mushroom trees, which I did make the big mushroom trees and these light trees myself. But like these plants and such are new. As you can see through the fog, like when you walk through it, you kind of leave a trail behind it, which is something Tony was talking about earlier. I've just put this fog kind of along the ground in places in the forest. When we moved into the forest, you can start to see some fog hanging in the air. Those are the fog sheets I was talking about. You can see the light shafts coming between the fronds of the large trees. You can see some of the other plants we've included in the forest. Really, this last sprint, we just spent a lot of time trying to like add in new plants to kind of like fill out the forest so that it's not quite as empty. I think it's turned out looking pretty good. Like we have some nice light shaft effects. We have a lot of more like plants and stuff so that it doesn't look as barren. We got the fog hanging in the air and the fog hanging around the ground from the fog sheets and the particle systems. And as we come here to the end of our little forest stroll, we're going to be coming up on our lake, which, granted, is like sort of the least developed area of this because we spent most of our time on the forest, but we did try to add some nice stuff to the lake. You can see kind of like some fog hanging over the top of the lake, some fog here on the edge, and we got a lot of plants like hanging around the edge of the lake. But just looking out over the lake, that brings us to the end of the things we've put together. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Yeah. So, how many? Just because I was noticing how y'all did a couple of things. How many layers does y'all's landscape texture have? It looked really good.
I believe it has 3. It has 1 for the grass, 1 for the rock, and 1 for the path. Landon set that up initially, so he might be able to answer more accurately have if I'm just wrong about that.
No, you described it pretty right.
Yeah, it
It just
looks
has
really
the
good.
3.
Just to open it up, it's
So I had a question in chat, which I'll repeat while you're pulling that up. Did anybody think about using cloud resources to do some of the heavy lifting on setting things up, or was that just not practical?
I don't know. I know that I'm not super familiar with how Unreal does that kind of thing. I would imagine that you probably can. I mean, I think Unity can, so I would imagine Unreal does it too, since they're more or less like the free engine competitors. But I don't know how to go about doing that. That might have been a good solution for especially just how egregiously long it takes to build lighting. This is the landscape material we had, so I think if you come over here, like you can see like it's got like a layer and a height section, but like there's only the 3 layers, the grass, the gravel, and the rock. And then you can kind of see how it's blended together. Like you have the macro variation up here, which is something I pulled from some other Unreal materials. And then we have 2 instances of each of the materials, which both pull from this like landscape coordinate like tiling here, that are each scaled slightly differently. And then I plug that into like the top ones of each of these get this one, and the bottom ones get this one. And I did the same thing for the normals. And then I just plugged all of that into these linear interpolations, which use a value that we get from the macro texture variation to determine which one it is. It's a nasty spider web of connections, but it eventually boils out to just like this like blend for the normal map and this blend for the regular textures, and then we fade the normal over a distance, similar to how Andrew did it in his. And then we just plug that into the slots, and that's how we get our landscape material to work. Anybody else got anything? I can't get chat to pull up, so if there's anything in chat, I can't see it.
So one more question, Eric. What were your influences on building these environments? Did you guys just come up with it on your own, or were you influenced by certain games? And if so, which ones were you influenced by?
So my influence, at least, I guess others can also speak if they had some other things that influenced them. One, I just like started initially by looking up Alien Force and stuff, and I let me see if I can find out where the image is, because I think I have it saved somewhere. Not there. I had a reference image that I looked at a bit. Yeah. This one was kind of the initial starting point that I was looking at, which is a much more professional project, also done in Unreal, from somebody who probably has a lot more experience. But I looked at that a lot. I thought about the original reveal trailer for No Man's Sky, not like how it launched. I recognize that's a game that got a lot better over time, but yeah, we all know how that one started. And also Xenoblade Chronicles X was another inspiration for the forested area, at least for me.
When we were going to the design phase, we kind of talked about the Pandora from Avatar and Subnautica. I like the plant life from Subnautica because it was always had the bioluminescence.
I think we took the idea of starting in the cave area and then walking out into a big mountain overlooking the rest of the world from Breath of the Wild, like the Zelda game.
Okay, that's cool. I always like hearing what the influences were, where the ideas originated from. So that was really interesting. It's beautiful, guys. Obviously, it's gorgeous. Other questions that people might have for mission control? Okay, thank you, guys. Eric, you can unshare your screen. So yeah, so that was good. That was enjoyable. I always enjoy looking at what teams have been able to accomplish. It surprises me sometimes how far people get. With very little foreknowledge of how Unreal works. Because a lot of you come in with some Unity knowledge, but very few people come in with Unreal knowledge. So that's always nice. And I hope for you, it always is for me when I look at how Unreal does things. I always think about how in a very, 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 very simplified way we do some of those things in our programming assignments, and it always gives me kind of a little thrill to go, oh my God, look at how how far these things have come, how much these engines do. Always it blows me away. But I also think too that programming a few things ourselves gives us a much greater appreciation for what those engines are doing. So anyway, like I said, this was fun. We have one more group of presentations. Those are going to be on Friday, where the other three teams are going to go, and hopefully they're going to blow us away just as much as these guys have done. So I'm looking forward to that. Programming assignments are due Monday. As I said, check the notes because I continue to update them to try to make them, have more examples and stuff in there that you'll find useful in your programming assignment. Are there any questions for me before we call it a day? Speak up now or forever hold your peace, as they say. Okay, thank you guys. I'll see y'all on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.